I was counting coins for milk when I realized my wallet was gone. The sound of the coins clinking against the kitchen table stopped mid-air, and so did my breath. That wallet held everything. My son's lunch money, the rent I hadn't paid yet, the tiny folded picture of my late husband that I looked at when the world felt too heavy. I searched my bag twice, then the counter, then the floor. The cracked linoleum stared back empty. Panic crawled up my throat. "Did you drop it, Mama?" Rui asked softly. He was 6, small for his age, his voice always carrying the kind of calm children shouldn't need. I forced a smile. "Maybe. Don't worry, sweetheart. Mama will find it." He nodded, trusting me because children always do. But I knew what I'd lost wasn't just leather and paper. It was our week's survival. By evening I was still searching. I retraced every step, the bus stop, the corner store, the hallway of our crumbling apartment block. The hallway light flickered weakly, buzzing like an insect trapped in glass. Outside, rain began to fall, thin at first, then relentless. I leaned against the peeling wall, my body shaking from more than cold. Sometimes life feels like an ocean determined to drown you slowly, one small wave at a time. By the time I returned upstairs, Rui was asleep on the couch, his hands clutching his toy car. I covered him with my scarf and sat by the window, watching the rain blur the streetlights. Our fridge hummed softly behind me, nearly empty. I had enough rice for tomorrow. Maybe. I whispered into the darkness. "Please just give me one quiet day." A knock interrupted my prayer. I froze. No one visited us after dark. The hallway light outside flickered again as I opened the door just enough to peek. A man stood there, soaked to the bone, his hair dripping rain, his eyes steady and unreadable. In his hand, my wallet. "You dropped this," he said. His voice was calm, low-edged with something I couldn't name. For a moment I couldn't speak. My fingers trembled as I took it. "How did you?" "Bus stop," he replied simply. "I saw you searching earlier." The light above us buzzed and dimmed, casting him in shadow. He looked ordinary, worn jacket, tired posture, like someone used to being ignored. But there was something about his stillness that made the air feel heavier. "Thank you," I managed, clutching the wallet to my chest. "I don't know how to repay," he interrupted softly. "You already did. You didn't assume the worst of people." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He gave a faint smile. "Most would have thought I stole it." "I wouldn't," I said quietly. "I can't afford to stop believing in honest people." Something flickered in his eyes then, surprise, maybe admiration. It was gone before I could name it. He nodded once. "Then keep believing." Rain dripped from his coat, pooling at his feet. I wanted to invite him in to offer tea, but hesitation held me back. He didn't look like someone who needed warmth. He looked like someone who'd forgotten how to ask for it. Before I could find the words, he stepped back into the hall. "Take care, Mrs. Lin," I said. "Just Lin." He gave another small nod. "Good night, Lin." And with that, he turned and walked away. I stood in the doorway, clutching the wallet like a heartbeat. My fingers brushed the photo inside, the same one I'd thought was gone forever. For a second, the heaviness in my chest eased. The world had given me back a small mercy. But as his footsteps faded down the hall, I felt something else. A strange pull. The kind that happens when fate brushes past but doesn't linger long enough to explain itself. The next morning I told Rui about the stranger. "So he brought it back?" he asked, eyes wide. "Yes," I said, smiling faintly. "See? There are still good people." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe we should bake him cookies to say thank you." I laughed softly. "Maybe one day when we can afford flour." That day I went to work at the diner like always. My uniform smelled of coffee and grease, my feet ached before noon, and customers came and went without seeing the person behind the apron. But for the first time in a long time I felt seen, not by anyone in the diner, but by a stranger who had handed me back not just my wallet, but a reason to believe that kindness still existed in this city. I found myself glancing at the door every time it opened, half hoping to see him again, half afraid that I would. He didn't come. That night, as I walked home in the rain again, I passed the same bus stop where I'd lost my wallet. The streetlight flickered above it, and for a heartbeat I imagined I saw him standing there. The same calm figure, hands in pockets, rain glistening on his coat. But when I blinked, the sidewalk was empty. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. Maybe not. Back home, Rue was waiting with a drawing. A picture of the three of us holding hands under a rainbow. "This is you, me, and the man who brought your wallet back," he said proudly. I stared at the picture for a long time. Maybe the world doesn't forget good souls after all. Maybe it just hides them until we're desperate enough to notice. I tucked the drawing beside the photo in my wallet. It felt like a promise I didn't understand yet. One that belonged to a story still waiting to unfold. And as I turned off the light that night, I didn't see the black car parked at the end of the street. Or the driver standing under the rain, holding an umbrella for the man watching my window from the shadows. He had my wallet once. But I had his attention now. The next morning began with the smell of burnt toast and the sound of Rue humming off-key. He was sitting on the floor, tying his shoes, his small tongue sticking out in concentration. "Don't forget your lunch," I said, wrapping his sandwich in newspaper. He smiled, clutching his worn backpack. "Don't forget to smile at work." That line, so innocent, so sweet, felt like a prayer I didn't deserve. By 8, I was already behind the counter of the diner. My hair tied up, my name tag slightly crooked. The place buzzed with noise. Frying oil hissing, silverware clinking, customers snapping fingers for refills. To most people, I was invisible, another uniform, another face refilling coffee cups. "Table 4 wants their order faster," my boss barked. "And don't forget, wipe down the counters." "Yes, sir," I murmured. He walked away before hearing me. By mid-morning, the tips jar looked as sad as I felt. A few coins, a crumpled bill. That was my worth in this city. Then it happened. When I went to clear table 6, my boss's voice cut through the clatter. "Lynn." I turned startled. He held up a handful of coins. "These were supposed to be in the register. Why were they under your tray?" I didn't. Don't lie." His tone sliced through me, cold and public. "You think we don't count? You think I wouldn't notice?" Heads turned. Customers stared. My face burned. "I would never steal," I said quietly, trembling. "You can check the books," he sneered. "Don't give me that saint act. You poor types always have excuses." The words hit harder than I expected. Poor types. As if dignity had a price tag I couldn't afford. The diner grew quieter, the kind of silence that feeds on humiliation. I wanted to disappear. To vanish back into the small, safe space of my apartment where no one could see how easily a word could break me. Then I remembered the stranger's voice from last night. "Keep believing in honest people." So I straightened my back, met my boss's glare and said softly, "I didn't take it." He rolled his eyes. "We'll see." The hours that followed were heavy, the kind of weight you carry in your chest, not your hands. When my shift ended, I stayed to clean. My boss didn't thank me, didn't even look at me. As I wiped the counter one last time, I noticed something unusual on the corner table. A cup of coffee untouched, the steam still rising. And beside it, an envelope. I looked around. No one claimed it. The bell above the door had rung 5 minutes ago. Whoever left it was already gone. Inside the envelope was a stack of crisp bills, far more than a tip, and a small note in neat handwriting. "Integrity deserves witnesses. L." My breath caught. I stared at the initial. Just one letter, but enough to send a tremor through me. L. The stranger. I ran to the window, but the street outside was empty, washed clean by sunlight and traffic. For a long time I stood there, clutching the envelope. Not because of the money, though it would feed us for a week, but because of what it meant. Someone saw me. Someone believed me. And that somehow was more valuable than any paycheck. When I got home that night, Rue was waiting by the window as usual. "Did you smile today?" he asked. I knelt beside him and showed him the note. "Someone helped Mama today." He read it aloud, stumbling over the words. "Integrity?" "Integrity," I said softly. "It means being honest, even when it costs you." He frowned. "Like you." I smiled, but it wavered. "I try." Rue looked at the note again. "Then that person must know you're good." I glanced at the window. Outside the night was quiet, but for the first time it didn't feel empty. Somewhere out there, a man with calm eyes and rain-soaked kindness was watching, not out of pity, but from a strange, wordless connection that I didn't yet understand. Over the next few days the diner felt different. My boss avoided my eyes. Customers smiled a little more. Someone had left a newspaper clipping taped to the register about a local CEO donating millions to small-town schools. The man's name was hidden behind corporate jargon, but there, at the end of the article, was a familiar letter. LZ Holdings. I felt my heartbeat stumble. Again. That night, as I washed the dishes, Rue came running from the table. Mama! Look outside. I turned and froze. Across the street, under a flickering streetlight, a man stood. No umbrella this time, no rain to hide him. Just a quiet figure in a plain coat, hands in his pockets, looking up at our window. Before I could move, a car pulled up. Black, sleek, too expensive for this neighborhood. The driver opened the door. The man nodded once, to me I think, and disappeared inside. The car drove off, leaving only headlights fading into the night. I stood there long after he left, my hands still wet with soap, heart beating like it remembered something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. I didn't know who he really was, but I knew what I felt when he looked at me. Like my life, for once, wasn't invisible. And somehow, I had the sinking feeling that losing my wallet was never an accident. It was the beginning. Before people knew me as the waitress, I had a name that used to sound soft when someone else said it. Before tips and exhaustion, I was a wife. Before debts, I was a dreamer. And before all of it, there was a bakery that smelled like butter and sunlight. Back then, our mornings began with music. The hum of the old oven, the laughter of neighbors waiting for fresh rolls, my husband Jian, teasing me for always burning the first batch. He used to say, "It's a good sign, Lynn. Burnt first batch means the rest will be perfect." And I believed him. Because everything felt perfect when we were young and together. We didn't have much, a rented shop, secondhand mixers, and a tiny back room we called home, but we had plans. He would knead the dough, and I'd handle the customers. He said I smiled better than anyone he knew. It was a small life, but it was warm. And warmth was all I ever wanted. Then came the cough. First it was nothing. Then it was blood on white towels, hospital corridors, bills taller than the dreams we'd built. I sold the oven first. Then the signboard. Then the jewelry my mother left me. He kept saying, "Just a little longer, Lynn. I'll get better." But sickness doesn't care about promises. When Jian died, I thought the world should stop moving. But it didn't. Rent still came due. Rui still needed milk. And the bakery we built together stood empty, like a tomb made of sweet memories and unpaid debts. I packed our things in a single suitcase and left the town where everyone pitied me. I didn't want pity. I wanted a chance to survive. The city was crueler than I'd imagined. No one cared about a widow with flour-stained hands and a child clinging to her skirt. Jobs required experience. Apartments required deposits. Dreams required money. So I took whatever I could. Cleaning offices by day. Waiting tables by night. Sleeping 4 hours, eating one meal, smiling through exhaustion. But every morning I told myself the same thing. Kindness isn't weakness. It's inheritance. My mother used to tell me that before she passed. She said, "The world takes a lot, Lynn. But don't ever let it take your gentleness." So even when people lied, even when they cheated, I didn't harden. I just learned to hide my softness where no one could trample it. Some nights, when Rue was asleep, I sat by the window and wrote in a small notebook, the same one I keep even now. I wrote recipes we could never afford to bake. And I wrote letters to Jian. "Dear Jian, today I worked 12 hours but earned enough for Rue's school shoes. I hope you're proud of us. Dear Jian, sometimes I think of the bakery's smell and almost cry. Not because I miss it, but because I can still remember it. Dear Jian, if I ever love again, I hope it feels like peace, not survival. It's strange how love, once lost, becomes both wound and compass. Every kindness after that is measured against what you lost. Every gentle word becomes both comfort and reminder. So when that stranger handed me back my wallet and said, 'Keep believing in honest people,' it didn't just sound kind. It sounded like an echo. Like something Jian would have said if the storm hadn't taken him. A week after that night, I found Rue sitting at the kitchen table, carefully drawing again. "What's that, sweetheart?" I asked. He showed me the paper. A small bakery with flowers by the window, and the words Mama's Place written in crooked letters. "For when we open again," he said proudly. I laughed, but tears filled my eyes. Maybe someday. You always say that, he said with a pout. Because someday is still better than never, I whispered. That evening, as I tucked him into bed, he said something that caught me off guard. Mama, do you think Papa can see us? I hesitated. I hope so. Then he must be happy, Rue said softly. Because we're still kind. Those words sank deep. Because he was right. We were still kind through hunger, through loss, through humiliation. And maybe that was what made the world send that stranger back into our lives. Sometimes I wonder if fate tests people like me just to see how much one heart can give before it breaks. How many times you can lose something and still choose to love anyway. I don't know. But I do know this. Every trial, every empty day, every cruel word. It all led me to the moment a man in the rain knocked on my door and reminded me that goodness still walks this earth. And maybe, just maybe, that knock wasn't just luck. Maybe it was the sound of fate saying, "You've given enough. Now let someone give back." When I closed my notebook that night, I felt a strange calm I hadn't known in years. And though I didn't know it yet, the story of my lost wallet wasn't about losing or finding. It was about what happens when grace decides to visit a tired heart. I didn't know his name then, but soon I would. And when I did, my life would never look the same again. It had been almost a month since the night he returned my wallet. Enough time for the city to swallow that small miracle, for the days to stretch back into their weary rhythm. The diner still smelled of oil and burnt coffee, the same customers still complained, and my hands were still raw from washing too many dishes. Life had gone back to being small and quiet, until one evening, a familiar voice broke through the noise. "Coffee, please. Black." I turned and the world paused. It was him. The man from the rain. He stood by the counter in a simple shirt, sleeves rolled, looking entirely out of place yet completely at ease. His presence felt different this time, not like an accident but an intention. For a second I forgot how to move. Then instinct took over. "Right away," I said, trying to sound casual. When I brought his cup, he was already watching me, not with the polite glance of a stranger but with recognition. "You remember me," he said. "How could I forget?" I replied. "You saved my week." He smiled faintly. "You saved my faith and decency." I wanted to laugh at that, but something about his tone stopped me. It wasn't a compliment. It was confession. He came back the next day. And the next. Always around dusk, when the diner grew quiet and the world outside turned gold through the glass. Sometimes he ordered coffee, sometimes tea. Once he just sat there watching the rain outside. And every time he left a generous tip, always folded neatly under his cup, with a single initial at the corner. L. I pretended not to notice, but I did. It wasn't just the money. It was the way he asked about Rue, remembered details, listened without judgment. He'd ask, "How's school going for your boy?" Or "Do you still bake at home?" And when I said, "Only when I can afford flour," he smiled, as if filing the answer away like something precious. It wasn't pity in his eyes. It was respect. And that was rare. One evening when I brought his order, he asked quietly, "Do you ever think of leaving this job?" I laughed. "Every day. But dreams don't pay rent." "What's the dream?" I hesitated. "A bakery. Something small. Somewhere warm." He nodded slowly. "Then you should build it." "With what?" I asked. "Flour and hope?" He looked at me then, and for a moment his eyes weren't calm, they were fierce. "Sometimes hope is the only capital that matters," he said. I stared at him, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to me like that, like my life was more than survival. When I finally found my voice, I asked, "Do you give advice to every waitress you meet?" He smiled. "No. Just the ones who make me believe people can still be good." A few days later, I caught him staring at the old piano near the back of the diner, broken, dusty, long forgotten. He traced the keys gently. "Do they still play?" "No," I said. "The owner doesn't want to fix it. Says music doesn't buy meals." He chuckled softly. "Maybe it buys moments instead." That night, when I locked up, I found an envelope taped to the piano lid. Inside was enough cash for a full repair and a note, for the next person who needs to hear a song instead of an order. I didn't tell anyone it was him. Some gifts are meant to stay anonymous. like miracles too fragile for daylight. The diner slowly began to change. Customers lingered longer. The owner smiled more. Even my boss, who once accused me of stealing, started greeting me with something almost kind. And every evening the stranger would take the same seat by the window, nodding when I passed by, not to be seen but to see. It was comforting, dangerous even, because I had started waiting for him. One night, when the clock struck closing time and the last customer left, I noticed he was still there, tracing patterns on his coffee cup. "It's late," I said. "You should head home." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "What about you?" I shrugged. "I live close." He hesitated, then said, "May I walk you there?" I almost said no, but the words that came out were, "If you don't mind the rain." We walked side by side under the weak glow of streetlights. The rain was gentle that night, like it was listening. When we reached my building, he stopped by the gate. "Thank you for the company," he said softly. "You're the one who walked me home," I replied, smiling. He looked at me like he wanted to say something more but held it back. Instead, he asked, "Do you still believe in honest people?" "Yes," I said. "Do you?" He hesitated, then said, "I'm trying to." As he turned to leave, I called after him, "You never told me your name." He paused, glancing over his shoulder. The rain caught in his hair, glimmering under the streetlight. "Just call me Mr. Lee," he said. Then he smiled. A small secret smile that lingered in the air long after he disappeared into the night. I stood there, clutching my umbrella, heart unsteady. Mr. Lee, plain name. Unfamiliar comfort. I didn't know why I wanted to remember it so badly. Maybe because it sounded like a beginning disguised as coincidence. And deep down, something told me that the man who once returned my wallet was about to return something far more precious, something I'd long forgotten how to ask for. The diner's neon sign hummed in the drizzle outside, blurring the world into streaks of gold and gray. It was another long night, until Mr. Lee didn't leave after his coffee. He waited by the counter while I stacked plates. "You look tired," he said quietly. "I'm used to tired," I answered, smiling because that's what waitresses do. "Then let me help." "With what?" I asked, laughing lightly. "Coffee refills?" His eyes softened. "Something more lasting than caffeine." That was how it began. A few days later, he returned with a folded paper, an offer. His company's catering branch needed new staff. He said I could cook instead of serve, bake instead of chase tips. It sounded like a dream someone else was meant to live. "I'm not qualified," I whispered. He leaned forward. "You're qualified in perseverance. The rest can be taught." I hesitated for nights. Then, after another argument with my landlord about late rent, I took the risk. The next week, I found myself walking into a building of glass and light. His world. Receptionists in silk greeted him with bows. Elevators whispered shut behind polished shoes. I clutched my worn purse, feeling like a smudge on marble. He noticed. "You don't need to shrink here," he said gently. "You're the reason I'm standing at all." The catering floor smelled like roasted herbs and lemon zest, laughter spilling from the kitchen. For the first time in years, I put on an apron that didn't smell like despair. At first, everyone stared, the boss's charity case. But when the first tray of pastries came out of the oven, golden and perfect, the whispers turned into praise. Mr. Lee walked in during lunch service, tasting one quietly. His expression didn't change until he finished the last bite. He turned to the staff. "This," he said, "is what hope tastes like." The room went silent. Then someone started clapping. I hid behind the counter so no one would see me cry. From that day, he started visiting the kitchen more often. He'd bring Rue's favorite sweets, help me carry boxes that didn't need carrying, ask questions that didn't need answers. It wasn't romance. It was something slower. Two lonely people learning how to exist in the same air without fear. When he watched me bake, his expression softened the way clouds part after days of rain. One night, I stayed late to finish an order. Everyone else had left. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass walls, and the hum of the ovens felt like a heartbeat. I looked up and he was there, jacket over his arm. "You shouldn't be here," I said. He smiled. "Neither should you." He rolled up his sleeves, started wiping the counters. It was ridiculous, a billionaire cleaning crumbs. Why are you doing that? Because sometimes, he said. The only way to feel human is to stand beside someone who reminds you how. When I laughed, he looked startled, like he hadn't heard that sound in a long time. He told me then, almost absently, that he once had everything, until loss hollowed him out. He didn't elaborate and I didn't ask. But when he looked down at the ring still on my hand, I saw the question in his eyes. I'm not ready to take it off yet, I said softly. He nodded. Don't. Some promises deserve to stay visible. That night he walked me home again. But this time we didn't talk about honesty or faith. We just walked, 2 stories still unfinished, finding rhythm in silence. The following week, Rui came to visit the kitchen. His eyes went wide at the sight of the machines. Uncle Lee, he shouted, running up to him like they'd known each other forever. I froze, embarrassed. But Mr. Lee knelt to Rui's height, smiling genuinely. Uncle Lee, huh? I like that. He let Rui wear his executive badge, showing him how to frost a cupcake. The staff watched, whispering. And for a moment we didn't look like charity. We looked like a family. Later that night, when I got home, there was something on our doorstep. A single rose, fresh and bright, tied with a note. Thank you for reminding me what warmth feels like. I pressed it to my chest and closed my eyes. I didn't know what I felt, grateful, afraid, seen. Maybe all of it. Because somewhere between a lost wallet and a repaired piano, my life had quietly changed direction. And I had no idea how to stop it. It started with whispers. Little things first. The way people glanced when I passed in the hallway. The sudden hush when Mr. Lee appeared near the kitchen. Then came the photos. One morning I walked into the diner we supplied, and every screen was showing us. Mr. Lee, the billionaire CEO, and me, the poor single mother, walking home under the same umbrella. The headline read, CEO's secret mistress? The woman who stole his heart and his empire. I felt the floor tilt. The air around me turned heavy, electric with shame. When I reached the office, security was already waiting. Mr. Lee's orders, they said gently. You're to stay home until the situation settles. My throat closed. I didn't do anything wrong. They looked at me with pity, the kind reserved for people already judged. Reporters followed me home that night. Flashes lit up our dark street, questions slicing through the rain. Did he buy you your apartment? How long have you been seeing him? Are you the reason he skipped the charity gala? Rui clung to my leg, terrified. I pushed through the crowd, shielding him with my body, my hands shaking. Inside, I locked the door and sank to the floor. The world had decided who I was, and I had no voice loud enough to correct it. My phone buzzed all night. Unknown numbers, messages that blurred together. Gold digger. Homewrecker. Enjoy it while it lasts. I turned it off, held Rui close and whispered, it's going to be okay. But even he knew I was lying. The next morning I went to the office to resign. My ID card no longer opened the door. That's when I saw him, standing by the glass window, surrounded by executives and flashing cameras. Mr. Lee looked different. Not calm, not distant. Angry. Protective. I didn't mean to listen, but his voice carried. You will not talk about her like that. She is not my scandal. She's the only person in this company who still remembers what integrity looks like. The room erupted. Someone shouted, You're risking everything for her. He replied, Everything I built means nothing if it costs someone her dignity. He turned and saw me in the doorway. For a moment the entire world vanished. Lynn, he said quietly, please wait. But I shook my head. This isn't fair to you. Or Rui. Or anyone. He stepped closer, eyes softening. You didn't ask for any of this. I did. I took a deep breath. Then let me walk away before you lose more. He smiled faintly, almost broken. Too late for that. That afternoon he called a press conference. I watched it from my small living room, heart pounding. He stood before the microphones, calm but firm. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, questions rained down. Mr. Lee, is it true you've been supporting a single mother financially? Is she your mistress? He raised his hand, silencing the noise. That woman saved my life, he said clearly. When I was sick, exhausted, and ready to give up, she reminded me what decency looked like. She fed me when I was nothing. You call her scandal. I call her salvation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. If loving her makes me guilty, he added, then I'll wear that guilt with pride. I covered my mouth. Tears blurred the screen. The man I thought I'd met by chance was now standing against the entire world for me. By evening, the city was on fire with his confession. The company's stock plunged. Sponsors withdrew. But online people began asking who I really was, not a scandal but a symbol. Messages poured in. You gave him back his humanity. You're braver than you think. Maybe love isn't about equals, it's about balance. Still, none of it felt real. That night I heard a knock. When I opened the door, Mr. Lee stood there, soaked from rain again, just like the first time. But this time there was no wallet, no quiet mystery, only vulnerability. I lost everything today, he said simply. I swallowed hard. Then why come here? He met my eyes. Because everything I lost was replaceable. You aren't. Silence stretched between us, filled with the hum of rain. Rue peeked from behind the door, clutching his toy car. Mr. Lee knelt and smiled gently. I'm sorry I scared you last time, little one. Rue blinked. Are you still rich? Mr. Lee laughed softly, shaking his head. Not anymore. Good, Rue said. Mama likes simple people. We all laughed then, the kind of laughter that hurts because it heals. He looked up at me. I don't care what the papers say. I care that you believe me. I hesitated. You lied about who you were. I did, he admitted. Because I wanted you to see the man, not the money. And somehow you did. He took a step closer. Let me start again. No titles. No company. Just me. The thunder rolled outside, echoing the night we first met. Only this time I wasn't the one saving him. He was saving me from believing I was small, from thinking dignity only exists for the powerful. And as he stood there, soaked and unguarded, I realized love wasn't about being rescued. It was about being seen completely, painfully, and still being chosen. When he left that night, I knew his words would change everything. For him. For me. For everyone watching. But I also knew something else. Storms always strip away what's fake, leaving only what's real. And in that storm all I could see was him. The city skyline used to glitter with his name. Now it glimmered with the sound of rumors. After the press conference, everything began to crumble. Contracts dissolved overnight. Partners withdrew. Investors sold their shares as if his reputation was contagious. I watched it all from my small kitchen. The news blaring words like disgraced, reckless, love-blind, so. And each time they said it, my stomach twisted tighter. Because he'd chosen me. And now the world was making him pay for it. When I tried to call, his number went straight to voicemail. When I visited the office, the guard said he'd cleared his desk. The same marble lobby that once echoed his footsteps now swallowed his absence like a secret. One of the janitors whispered as I left. He walked out without saying a word. Looked like a man who decided silence was easier than fighting. Days turned into weeks. The mansion he lived in, the one people used to photograph for magazines, stood empty, windows dark. The paper said he'd resigned, sold off his last shares, and disappeared from the city. And I went back to work. Not because I wanted to, but because bills still came and Rue still needed breakfast. But every time the diner door opened, my eyes flicked up, half hoping, half dreading, that he'd walk through it. He never did. One night I closed late. The city rain was sharp, the kind that smells like metal. On my way home I passed his building, or what used to be his. The lights were off except for one faint glow on the top floor. I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't stand the thought of him sitting there alone, surrounded by ghosts of power and the echo of my name. A week later I got a letter. No return address, just my name written in his familiar, deliberate handwriting. Inside was one line. I had everything, Lynn, except a reason to come home. And beneath it a single key. To what, I didn't know. But the moment I held it I understood something. This wasn't the end of his empire. It was the start of his surrender. The next morning I took Rue to school, then followed my heart, to wherever that key would lead. The address was written faintly on the envelope's edge. It took me to a small garden behind an old house, far from the city's glass towers. He was there. No suit, No bodyguards. No pretense. Just him sitting on a wooden bench, surrounded by silence. He looked up as I approached, a slow, tired smile spreading across his face. "You found me," he said softly. "You weren't hiding," I replied. "You were waiting." He laughed, but it was hollow. Maybe both. His eyes were different, softer, stripped of power. Like the man who once stood in the rain returning my wallet. "I lost everything," he said simply. "No," I said. "You gave it away." He stared at the small pond ahead of us, watching the ripples from the falling rain. "I thought control was strength," he said. "Turns out it was just loneliness in a suit." "Then maybe loneliness needed to break before you could breathe again," I said quietly. He looked at me, then truly looked. "Do you hate me for dragging you into my ruin?" I shook my head. "You didn't drag me. I walked in. Maybe I just didn't realize I was walking toward something that wasn't ruin at all." For a long moment we sat in silence, the rain pattering softly against the wooden roof. Then he said something that made my chest ache. "When I met you, you gave a stranger kindness. I wanted to repay you with comfort. But somewhere along the way, I realized comfort isn't what you needed." I frowned. "Then what do I need?" He smiled sadly. "Freedom. The kind I never had the courage to give myself." He stood, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I'm leaving the city," he said. "Starting over. Somewhere no one knows my name." I swallowed hard. "And you're telling me because?" "Because you're the only person I've ever wanted to say goodbye to." Goodbye. That word had haunted me once before, in a hospital room beside my dying husband. And now, it stood between me and another man who had taught me to believe again. "I don't want your goodbye," I whispered. "I just want your peace." He smiled faintly. "Then wish me that." The rain fell harder, blurring the world between us. He handed me something small, a rose pressed flat between glass. "It survived the storm," he said. "Like you." And then, without waiting for an answer, he turned and walked down the path, slow, steady, unguarded. I stood there long after he disappeared, clutching the rose like a heartbeat I wasn't ready to let go of. That night, Rue asked, "Mama, is the man with the wallet coming back?" I hesitated, then kissed his forehead. "Maybe one day. But for now, he's finding his way home." Rue nodded sleepily. "Then he's not lost." "No," I whispered, staring out the window. "He's just learning where home really is." And for the first time since everything began, I didn't cry for what we lost. I smiled for what we'd found, something neither fame nor fortune could destroy. Months passed. The city moved on as cities always do, quick to gossip, quicker to forget. But I didn't. Every time I baked a loaf of bread or folded Rue's school uniform, a thought of him would slip quietly into the rhythm of my day. Not guilt. Not longing. Just gratitude. Gratitude for the man who'd lost the world and somehow helped me find mine. Then one morning an envelope arrived. No name. No address. Just a pressed red rose inside and a note. "If you ever need help feeding others again, come to the place where the bread rises before the sun." I smiled, because I knew exactly what that meant. 2 days later, I took the early train out of the city. Rue sat beside me, eating an apple, humming his favorite song. "Where are we going, Mama?" he asked. "To find an old friend," I said. "One who might need a hand." The countryside rolled past in shades of gold and green. It reminded me of the life I'd once wanted, quiet, honest, full of small kindnesses. And when the train stopped, it was there. A modest building with a wooden sign that read Sunrise Clinic Bakery. He was outside, kneeling beside a group of children, helping them plant flowers. No suit, no cameras, no noise. Just a man in a linen shirt, smiling with the ease of someone who'd finally stopped running. When he saw me, the smile faded into something softer. "Lynn," he said. "You came." "I wasn't sure if I should," I admitted. He stood, brushing soil from his hands. "Then I'm glad doubt didn't win." Inside, the place smelled of bread and disinfectant. A small clinic on one side, a tiny bakery on the other. People from nearby villages came for medicine, tea, warmth. He handed a little girl a roll of bread and said gently, "Tell your mother this one's free." When he turned to me, his eyes were calm, peaceful in a way I'd never seen before. "This is what I do now," he said. "Heal people. Feed them. Both kinds of hunger." I looked around the bustling room, volunteers laughing, patients waiting, ovens humming. "You built this." He shook his head. "We built this. Everyone who once thought kindness was weakness." He paused, then added quietly, "You were the first." I wanted to tell him how proud I was, how beautiful it all was, but the words caught behind my ribs. Instead I said, "You didn't have to leave everything behind for me." "I didn't," he said. "I left it for myself. You just showed me what was worth keeping." Rui ran in then, holding a warm bun. "Uncle Lee, these are so good." He laughed, crouching to Rui's height. "You've grown taller." Rui grinned. "Mama says that's because of all the bread I eat. Then I'll keep baking," he said with a wink. And in that simple exchange, between the man who once had everything and the boy who had almost nothing, I saw redemption made real. Later that evening, after the last visitors left, we stood by the window watching the sunset. "It's peaceful here," I said. "It is," he replied. "But it's not complete." I turned to him. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You see, I learned something about love. It's not a transaction, Len. It's transformation. I don't want to repay you anymore. I want to walk beside you." My heart clenched. "Are you asking me to stay?" He nodded. "Stay. But not as a favor. Not as forgiveness. Stay because this," he gestured around the small glowing space, "feels like the home we both lost." I looked around, the bread cooling on the racks, the laughter from the courtyard, the scent of roses by the window. It didn't look like the life I dreamed of. It looked better. "I don't need atonement," I said softly. "Just honesty." He met my gaze. "Then stay, and I'll give you nothing but that." I smiled. "We'll see if you can keep that promise." He chuckled, glancing toward the garden. "I'm learning." When Rui came in holding 2 mugs of warm tea, he said, "Uncle Lee, Mama says we should thank people properly. So thank you for being kind." Mr. Lee smiled, his voice low. "Then tell your mama she's the reason I learned how." As the sun dipped below the hills, a soft wind carried the smell of fresh bread through the open door. He turned to me one last time and said, "Storms built us, Lin. But peace will keep us." And when he smiled, I knew the man who once ruled towers had finally found the only kingdom that mattered. A quiet life, shared honestly, with hands that healed instead of controlled. That night, before I slept in the small room they'd prepared for us, I wrote one last line in my old notebook. "Sometimes mercy returns, not as apology but as invitation." And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of rain. A year passed, and the clinic bakery became the heartbeat of our small town. Each morning the smell of fresh bread drifted down the dusty road, drawing children and elders alike. Some came for food, others for medicine, but most came for warmth. We called it the hearth, because that's what it felt like. A place where broken souls came to remember what home used to mean. And in the center of it all, him, Mr. Lee, who once ruled skyscrapers, now stood behind a wooden counter, apron dusted with flour, hair messy from the oven's heat. He laughed easily, greeted strangers like old friends, and still managed to burn the first batch of buns every morning. One afternoon, I caught him staring at a group of children eating outside. "What are you thinking?" I asked, wiping flour from my cheek. He smiled. "That they're happier with one loaf of bread than I ever was with billions." "You can't measure happiness," I teased. "Maybe not," he said, "but I can count smiles. That's enough." And when he looked at me, I realized his words weren't about the children anymore. We worked side by side. Long hours, tired hands, hearts lighter than they had any right to be. He never once mentioned the city or the company or the scandal. He didn't need to. The silence between us said more than any headline ever could. Rui loved helping too. He delivered bread to neighbors, played with Mr. Lee's dog, and kept asking if Uncle Lee could stay forever. One evening while washing dishes, Rui whispered, "Mama, you smile more now." "Do I?" I asked. He nodded, serious. "It's like the rain stopped inside you." A few weeks later, the mayor invited us to the town's annual harvest festival. I didn't know why until I saw the banner. in honor of the hearth for feeding more hearts than mouths. I almost cried right there. We set up a stall at the edge of the square, giving out bread to families who couldn't afford it. As the lanterns lit up and laughter filled the air, Mr. Lee stood beside me, handing out rolls, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes glowing in the golden light. When the music started, he leaned toward me and said, "You know what this reminds me of?" "What?" "The first time I saw you. In the rain. Holding your son. Choosing compassion over fear." I blushed looking down. "That feels like a lifetime ago." "It was," he said softly. "A lifetime that started over that night." Then without warning he turned to Rue. "Hey young man," he said, crouching down. "Can I ask you something important?" Rue grinned, suspicious. "Is it about chores?" Mama said. "No," he said, laughing. "It's bigger than that." From his pocket, he pulled out the same wallet he once returned to me, the old, worn one I'd thought I'd lost again months ago. Inside, instead of money, was a small velvet box. My heart stopped. He opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. Not flashy, not expensive, but real like him. He looked at Rue, not me. "Your mom once fed a stranger her last meal," he said gently. "That meal saved my life. Now I want to spend mine making sure she never goes hungry again. What do you think?" Rue blinked, then broke into a huge grin. "You have to ask me?" "Of course," Mr. Lee said. "You're the man of the house." Rue turned to me, eyes bright. "Mama, he's already family. Can I call him Dad now?" I laughed through tears. The crowd around us must have noticed, because the music faded, replaced by clapping and cheers. Mr. Lee slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't have an empire anymore," he said softly. "Just a heart that knows where it belongs." I cupped his cheek. That's all I ever wanted. Someone who knows how to stay. That night under the lanterns, our town celebrated a love born not from wealth or power, but from the simplest act of all, sharing what little you have and trusting it will be enough. The baker and the billionaire. The widow and the wanderer. Two stories that shouldn't have met, and yet somehow completed each other. When the fireworks bloomed above us, Rue tugged at my hand. "Mama, look. The sky's smiling too." I looked up at the streaks of gold and crimson bursting across the dark. He was right, because in that moment it felt like even heaven was celebrating with us. Later, as the music faded and people drifted home, I leaned into Mr. Lee's shoulder. He whispered, "Do you remember what you said the night we met?" I smiled faintly. "I said you'd freeze if you stayed out there too long." He chuckled. "You were right. I froze that night. But you thawed me." And when he kissed my forehead, I felt it, the quiet certainty that no storm, no headline, no loss could ever undo what we had built together. Because this time our story wasn't about rescue. It was about rebirth. The nights are quieter now. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. Just the soft hum of crickets outside, the faint scent of bread cooling by the window, and Rue's laughter drifting from his room. I sit at the small wooden table, candle burning low, and write in my diary, something I haven't done in years. Maybe I just want to remember. Maybe I want to thank the storm that brought him to my door. Sometimes I still see the woman I used to be. Standing in the rain, counting coins for milk, begging the world to be gentle. I wish I could tell her what I know now. That miracles don't always come wrapped in light. Sometimes they come in the form of a tired man holding your lost wallet, or a stranger who looks at you like you're not invisible. Sometimes kindness finds you when you've forgotten how to look for it. When I think about Mr. Lee now, I don't see the CEO the world once feared. I see the man who learned to laugh again, who burned bread on purpose just to make Rue smile, who still leaves a rose on my bakery counter every Monday morning without saying a word. He tells everyone that I saved him. But the truth? He saved me too. Not with money or power, but with something rarer, belief. People often ask how I managed to forgive the lies, the chaos, the scandal. The truth is, forgiveness wasn't a single decision. It was 100 small ones. Every morning I chose peace instead of anger, understanding instead of fear. Because love that's real doesn't demand perfection. It only asks for courage, the courage to stay soft after everything tried to harden you. Rue's growing fast now. He helps at the bakery after school, greets customers with that same shy smile I used to hide behind. Sometimes I catch him watching us with quiet curiosity, as if he already knows he's witnessing something rare. The other day he asked, "Mama, do you think Papa sees us?" I smiled. If he does, he's probably proud we're still kind. Mr. Lee overheard and added softly, "And strong." Rui grinned. "And full." We all laughed, because in that moment, I realized we'd filled every empty space life once left behind. If I've learned anything, it's this: kindness is never wasted. Even when it hurts, even when the world calls it foolish, it plants seeds in places you can't see, and one day when you least expect it, those seeds bloom into the life you prayed for. That's what happened to me. A lost wallet became a bridge between two broken hearts. A moment of honesty became a lifetime of trust. Now, every night before closing the bakery, I light a single candle by the window. It's my quiet way of saying thank you to the man who returned my wallet, to the husband I lost, to the universe that somehow knew when I'd had enough of sorrow. And when I blow it out, I whisper the same words I once wrote in my notebook long ago. If you've ever lost something precious, maybe it's on its way back, just wearing a different face. So yes, this is my story. The story of a woman who thought she'd been forgotten by life, only to find out life was just waiting for the right moment to return her faith. The story of how a single act of kindness, one small trembling gesture in a storm, can change everything. And if it ever happens to you, don't doubt it. Don't push it away. Just open the door. Because you never know, the stranger standing there might be holding not just your wallet, but the missing piece of your heart. That was my truth. If my story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share yours too. Someone out there might need the reminder that love still finds its way home.